G'day everybody, Prep Aussie here. I hope you're all well in whatever part of the world you're watching this video. Today is Saturday, the 2nd of October 2021, and the time here is 08:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Well folks, plenty to go through as usual, so let's get into it. Here is my sponsor, Totally Rawsome, who make golden activated turmeric paste and other products. Happy Healing Silica, Kakira bombs, which are fantastic, by the way, if you haven't tried them. If you haven't tried turmeric paste, folks, this golden activated turmeric paste, then you're missing out. I have it every day, and it has helped enormously with my knee pain. I also give it to my dog, Woody. He has it in his food, and it's helped with his hip pain. The stuff works, folks. Every single person I've recommended it to has raved about it and has recommended it to someone else. Here's where you can contact them, 0433 165 848 and info@totallyrawsome.com.au. And if you want to go and see the guys, go to these places here on the left to go where they are, okay? Alrighty. So much going on, so much going on. Right, 1 second, I want to show you something. Okay, just so everybody knows, this is what happened to my last video. It was removed from YouTube. It is now up on BitChute with all the other ones. That's it there. Look, folks, my time on YouTube is done. I won't be doing any more videos on YouTube. I don't even know if this one's going to get up. Some of you might see it. If you do, you're going to have to pass it on pretty quick because they'll probably take it down. And I don't care. You have to expect that in the art of war, etc. That's going to happen. If you're going to do this sort of stuff, you're going to have to expect that you're not running with the Nazi party. So that's what happens. You're just going to get taken down. It's okay. I don't care. I'll just go to BitChute and do it on BitChute. And if that gets taken down, I'll go to the next one and the next one and the next one, like everybody else. Okay. A couple other things. I'm going to show you some stuff from, and now this is important, right? WorkSafe, when they do a case, they have to take it to the Fair Work Commission, right, to prosecute people. Now, if you remember, here in Australia, in Melbourne, we had a massive problem with Melbourne's second lockdown, third lockdown. I don't know how many lockdowns they've had. They've had too many, but where the government was putting people into quarantine, in hotel quarantine, and expecting it all to work out fine. Well, what happened was they put people into quarantine, in hotel quarantine, and what happened was they infected everybody. So the security staff went home, gave it to their wives and kids and everyone else, and then they went shopping and they gave it to other people, blah, blah, blah. And it just exploded. Now this is really interesting, and you need to pay attention to what I'm saying here, okay? Because this is in the newspaper, but you had to literally dig in to find it, okay? So look at this. WorkSafe charges Victorian Health Department over COVID hotel quarantine program. Now, I won't bore you with the semantics of it, but basically what they said was, what WorkSafe said was that they exposed the security guards, the hotel staff, and anybody else to risk, unavoidable risk, because they didn't train the people properly. And i.e., they didn't have safe work method statements or risk assessments, which is the standard. So they didn't do any of that. So basically, WorkSafe said, well, you guys are at fault here. So that article, which I'll leave in the link, backs up exactly what I was saying 100%. You cannot, so it's, even if you're a government or you cannot expose the people who are working for you, even if they're subcontractors, you cannot expose them to risk. And they did. Now WorkSafe's taken them to court. The fine is something like $1.6 million or something. Let me have a look at it. It's a massive fine. They're going to fine them a massive amount of money, okay, because they expose not only the employees to risk, they expose the whole of Australia to risk. So WorkSafe, the people I was telling you about, got involved, which they have to do, and they said the Victorian government failed massively. You know, they call it the health department, but it's actually the government, because they didn't do their risk assessments, etc. So this is an actual case that you can find out. You can go on the Victorian website for WorkSafe, and you can find that judgment, and you can read it, and you can pull out the bits in the judgment that you need for your case. Okay, now moving on from that, there was a case by a New South Wales woman who took she's a carer. Well, she's not a carer. She works as a receptionist for a carer, right, at a residential care home, I guess. Now, she wasn't going to take the influenza jab, not the COVID jab. Right? She said, I don't need to take it. I'm not exposing anybody to risk, blah, blah, blah. And she says, I don't want that shit in my body. So, you know, she took it to, they sacked her. She took him to court, to the Fair Work Tribunal. They agreed with WorkSafe and said, well, you know, or her employer, you haven't done the right things, blah, 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 blah. Now, she appealed that decision to the Fair Work Commission, right? Now, the Fair Work Commission agreed with the initial ruling, but, and I'm going to show you that but now, right? 1 second. Okay, just for everybody's information, this is the case, Fair Work Commission FB 6015, Fair Work Commission decision, Fair Work Act 2009, appeal of decisions, Jennifer Kimber versus Sapphire Coast Community Aged Care, right? Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the details there. What I'm going to do is, if you look on the left-hand side, it's all numbered. Remember I told you everything will be numbered, right? 1, 2, 3. Right, we're going to go down to here, 99. Right, 99. The majority decision also raises a question of Mrs. Kimber's willingness or otherwise to have the COVID vaccine. And this is relied on as a reason for refusing to grant permission to appeal. During the appeal hearing, the Vice President asked Mrs. Kimber whether she would comply with the requirement to have the COVID vaccine. Mrs. Kimber's response was that she would consider the terms of any public health order that might be made given at the time that no such PHO had been given, and obtain the advice of her medical practitioner. It is hard to see what criticism could reasonably be levelled at Mrs. Kimber for this response. But the majority decision states that this response supports the inference that she holds a general anti-vaccination position. Right, it gets better. So looking down the left-hand side, number 100. Finally, the last paragraph of the majority decision cannot pass without comment. To suggest that Mrs. Kimber had a spurious objection to a lawful workplace vaccination requirement in circumstances where she had been advised by her medical practitioner that she did indeed have a medical contradiction to the flu shot, advised she would not have a flu shot, and had provided a properly completed IVMC form. It is a terrible mischaracterization of her and the circumstances in this case. Part 2, vaccine requirements in relation to COVID. Now, look, I'm going to cherry pick some of these, okay? Because they are important. And they back up exactly what I was saying to you guys as regards to the federal government, WorkSafe, etc., etc. So I'm going to cherry pick these ones and I'm going to read them to you so you understand, okay? Okay, number 105. The stated position of the Australian government is that the vaccine is voluntary. On the 21st of July 2021, the Prime Minister in a meeting in conference stated that people make their own decisions about their own health and their own bodies. That's why we don't have mandatory vaccinations in relation to the general population. Okay, 106. On 13th of August 2021, the Australian Council of Trade Unions, ACTU, and the Business Council of Australia issued a joint statement on mandatory COVID vaccinations in which it acknowledged the Australian government COVID vaccination policy, that the vaccination is voluntary, and confirmed the views of the BCA and the ACTU that the overwhelming majority of Australians, your work or your workplace, should not fundamentally alter the nature of vaccination. Emphasis added. Okay, 107. The Fair Work Ombudsman has publicly stated that employers will need to have a compelling reason before requiring vaccination, and that the overwhelming majority of employers should assume that they can't require their employees to be vaccinated against coronavirus. Emphasis added. 108. Safe Work Australia has publicly stated that most employees will not need to make vaccinations mandatory to meet their health and, now listen to this, this is important, will not need to make vaccinations mandatory to meet their health and safety obligations. Emphasis added. Despite this, 109. Many employers are declaring they will mandate COVID vaccines for their workers, and public health orders are being made by state governments in circumstances where there is no justification for doing so. Now remember, this is the Fair Work Commission. Whatever these guys write down as regards to employment has to be listened to. Now, this woman lost the case, like I said, which does mean a bit, like she lost the case. So they actually stated in this, they could have stopped at the point where they said, oh, she lost the case, but they didn't. What they did was they drafted out this second phase of the judgment with their general comments. Now, this is important because you can actually use these because they've now got what's called standing. They're actually documented and stamped, bang, signed off by the Fair Work Commission. So these they're not just thrown in the bin. So I hope you understand what I'm saying to you here. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but what I'm saying to you is they've been signed off by the Fair Work Commission in their judgment. So if you're a lawyer out there and you want to get hold of this, I would suggest you do so. And you guys that are bringing these cases to your employers can actually reference back to this, and it will get standing if you have to go to court. Now it gets worse, or gets better, whatever you want to say. 111. Mandatory COVID vaccinations, however, cannot be justified in almost every workplace in Australia. Now, it goes on and on, you know, it actually says that people need to take a deep breath and, you know, clear their head a bit. Now, these guys just didn't write this stuff down on a piece of paper. They actually went and researched this stuff. And I'm going to prove that to you right now. And inside this last bit, right, they've actually written a lot of statistical evidence. And I'm going to read you that now. So 113, okay, see 113. A, unlike many other vaccinations, such as those used to stop the spread of tetanus, yellow fever, and smallpox, COVID vaccinations are not designed to stop COVID. They are designed to reduce the symptoms of the virus. However, a fully vaccinated person can contract and transmit COVID. Guys, this is bombshell stuff. I don't know who was actually in this commission, but geez, they went to work on these guys really hard. Like, I'll keep reading. B, the science is clear in that COVID is less serious for those who are young and otherwise healthy compared to those who are elderly and or have comorbidities. In other words, the risk of COVID is far greater for those who are elderly or have comorbidities. Around 87% of those who have died with COVID in Australia are over 80 years of age and have other pre-existing illnesses listed on their death certificates. The World Health Organization has stated that most people diagnosed with COVID will recover without the need for medical treatment. The vaccines are provisionally approved for use in Australia, although that's changed, and are accordingly still part of a clinical trial. Now that is important, folks. That's still the case. There are side effects to the COVID vaccines that are now known. That side effects exist is not a conspiracy theory. The long-term effects of the COVID vaccines are unknown, and this is recognised by the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia, the people who approved it. Consent is required for participation in clinical trials. Guys, this stuff is like lob a grenade in the middle of Pfizer and everyone just boom. I'll just point out to you, they did not need to write this stuff, but they did. And it's really, really important that everybody gets hold of this and everybody reads it and everyone understands what they're saying. You can mandate as much as you want, but if I don't want to take it, I don't have to. And you can't make me lose my job. This stuff here, and it goes on, is going to literally blow the lid off all of this. Because people are going to get it and they're going to go to WorkSafe and say, Mate, listen, even your own commissioner said the same thing. Let's go on. Right, I'll pause it there for a second. Hang on, folks. Okay, 114. I'll read 114. They're all pretty pertinent, actually. Consent is required for all participation in clinical trials. Consent is necessary because people have a fundamental right to bodily integrity, that being autonomy and self-determination over their own body without unconsented physical intrusion. Voluntary consent for any medical treatment has been a fundamental part of the laws of Australia and internationally for decades. It is legally, ethically, and morally wrong to coerce a person to participate in a clinical trial. Do you understand what they're saying here? Guys, this is bombshell stuff. Like I said, coercion is not consent. I won't read all that, but that pretty well says it all. Coercion is not consent, i.e. making something mandatory and trying to force everybody to have it is not consent. Right, 116 I won't read because that's changed. Some of them have been approved, some haven't. Although this did make me laugh. This is not part of a conspiracy theory. Right, 117. This is where it gets interesting. 117. The requirement for consent in this context is not new and should never be controversial. The Nuremberg Code, formulated in 1947 in response to Nazi doctors performing medical experiments on people during World War II, is one of the most important documents in the history of the ethics of medical research. 118. The first principle of the code is that the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. The code goes on to say that this means that persons involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter as to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. Thank you. Is that not what I've been saying? You can't force somebody to have something if they haven't done a review and there's safety data to back it up. That's what that says. That's all I've been saying. So who's crazy now? (119) Informed and freely given consent is at the heart of the code and is rightly viewed as a protection of a person's human rights. Right, 126, folks. They're going on about the Syracuse principles, okay, which I'm not au fait to, but this is what it says. No state party shall, this is taken from the Syracuse principles, even in times of emergency, threatening the life of the nation, derogate from the covenant's guarantees of the right to life, freedom from torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, and from medical or scientific experimentation without free consent. I'll read the bottom part. These rights are not derogable under any conditions, even for the asserted purpose of preserving the life of the nation. This is consistent with Article 4 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Australia's National Statement 128. Australia's National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research 23 confirms that consent is a fundamental requirement for participation in any trial, and that no person should be subject to coercion or pressure in dealing whether to participate in a clinical trial. Now, do you remember when I said to you the federal government cannot say they're going to mandate vaccines? That's why. They can't. It's impossible. It's against the law for them to do so. So hive it off to the states. These guys are evil, folks. Right, okay. I'll pause it again, just wait. Okay. Can COVID underneath 129 on the left, can COVID vaccinations be mandated by employers on health and safety grounds? 130. The short answer to this question in almost every case is no. No. Right, I'm going to read the next bit, and then I'm just going to skip to the bottom so you guys can see the bottom, okay? The fundamental starting point here is the answer to the question, what is the risk? All risk controls are or should be designed to address an identified risk. The risk needs to be a real risk and not a perceived risk. The real risk for employers is that a person who has COVID will spread COVID to others within the workplace. Let me read that last bit again so you understand what I said. The real risk for employers is that a person who has COVID will spread COVID to others within the workplace. 132. The risk of spreading COVID only arises with a person who has COVID. This should be apparent and obvious. There is no risk associated with a person who is unvaccinated and does not have COVID. Notwithstanding the misleading statements by politicians that the unvaccinated are a significant threat to the vaccinated, supposedly justifying locking out the unvaccinated from society and denying them the ability to work. Now, this is important, 133. The primary duty of care for employers under health and safety law requires the employer to ensure health and safety so far as is reasonably practical by eliminating risk to health and safety. And if this is not a reasonably practicable risk, must be minimized so far as is reasonably practicable. There is nothing controversial in stating that vaccines do not eliminate the risk of COVID. Ta-da! Did I not say that from the very beginning? The employer has to do a risk assessment. If you don't have COVID, you are not a risk. It's that simple. There's no reason for them to ask you to take a vaccine. It's just dumb. It says it there. Okay, 135. In order for an employer to meet its duties under health and safety laws, it will need to minimize the risk of exposure to COVID in the workplace, which will require employers to apply all reasonably practical COVID control measures. That, by the way, is not the vaccine, because the vaccine doesn't stop you getting COVID. They already said that. 136, as noted earlier, Safe Work Australia, in relation to whether employees need to include mandatory vaccinations as a control measure to comply with work health safety duties, has advised it is unlikely that a requirement for workers to be vaccinated will be reasonably practicable. The Safe Works 137, the Safe Work Australia website also includes the following advice to employers. This is on their website, folks. They have a duty to ensure that you don't get COVID at work. That's their job. They don't have a duty to tell you to get a jab. However, there is a decision you will need to make taking into account your workplace. Most employers will not need to make vaccinations mandatory to comply with the model work health safety laws. A safe and effective vaccine is only part of keeping the Australian community safe and healthy. It goes on and on and on there, right? Testing is arguably a better control measure compared to vaccines in meeting health and safety obligations. Okay, and this is the big one. 146. Finally, it should be clearly understood that employers who mandate vaccinations will be liable for any adverse reactions their workers may experience, given this is a foreseeable outcome for some people under public health orders to mandate vaccines. Right? They go on and on and on. So it's not, like I said to you, unless your employer has done a risk assessment and has done all the health and safety requirements as mandated by WorkSafe, then they can't force you to have a vaccine. Even WorkSafe says that. You've got it in paper there. This thing actually arms every single person in Australia with the right to take it to court. That's why they wrote this, because they could see where this was going. I said about how much information they put in this, right? This is what I mean. So let's read 167. The Australian Financial Review. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. 168. The article goes on to note that about 17,385 people died with flu and pneumonia in 2019, where flu and pneumonia was either the underlying cause of or an associated cause of death. According to the Bureau of Statistics, in Sweden, doctors in one county analysed all their COVID deaths and found that COVID was the chief underlying cause of death in only 15% of cases. In 70% of cases, COVID was an associated cause of death, and in the remaining 15% of cases, it was irrelevant. To put all this further in perspective, Australia is ranked 118th in the world for COVID deaths. The amount of statistics these guys put in here is staggering. Each and every day, around 8,000 children die around the world from starvation, which of course is completely preventable. But if you read this around, I'll read 169. Of the deaths in Australia from COVID, only 1% were under the age of 50 in the same time period as the COVID deaths, 1,000 COVID deaths, around 200,000 people, Australians, have died for other reasons, including around 70,000 from cancer, 19,000 from heart disease, 17,000 from respiratory illness, not COVID, and 1,300 from strokes, and 4,500 from suicide. Right, now this one here, 173. In summary, the powers to make public health orders cannot lawfully be used in a way that is punitive, and human rights are not suspended during state of emergency disasters, like I said before. Right, this goes on, and right, this is the bottom. Right. 108. The statements by politicians that those who are not vaccinated are a threat to public health and should be locked out of society and denied the ability to work are not measures to protect public health. They are not about public health and are not justified because they do not address the actual risk of COVID. These measures can only be about punishing those who choose not to be vaccinated. If the purpose of the public health order is generally to reduce the spread of COVID, there is no basis for locking out people who do not have COVID, which is easily established by a rapid antigen test. Conversely, a vaccinated person who contracts COVID should be required to isolate until such times as they have recovered. 181. Blanket rules, such as mandating vaccinations for everyone across a whole profession or industry, regardless of the actual risk, fails the test of proportionality, necessity, and reasonableness. It is more than the absolute minimum necessary to combat the crisis and cannot be justified on health grounds. It is a lazy and fundamentally flawed approach to risk management and should be soundly rejected by courts when challenged. All Australians should vigorously oppose the introduction of a system of medical apartheid and segregation in Australia. It is a abhorrent concept and is morally and ethically wrong, and the antithesis of a democratic way of life and everything we value. 183. Australians should also vigorously oppose the ongoing censorship of any views that question the current policies regarding COVID. Science is no longer science if it is a person is not allowed to question it. Finally, and this is really important, all Australians, including those who hold or are suspected of holding anti-vax sentiments, are entitled to the protection of our laws, including the protections afforded by the Fair Work Act in this regard. One can only hope that the majority decision is recognised as an anomaly and not followed by others. Wow. So this woman lost the case, but these guys absolutely hammered the original decision. And this now has standing. Their words have standing. Someone will get a hold of this, go to court and go, look, this is what these guys said. And then the shit fight starts. Like I said, I'm going to put a link to it so you guys can read it yourself and use it, yeah? Righto, I've talked enough. Let's do the prayers. Wow, how amazing is this? Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you, falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Wow, it's pretty good. And okay, folks, as always, we'll finish with the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come,
Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. All right, I'll leave it there. Good luck. God bless. Prep out.